Hello, good morning to everyone. I hope that you can hear me all. We have many people connected, for which we are very, very happy. We are now starting the first webinar on environment and health. My name is Francesco ZAMBON, and I'm the coordinator of the Regions for Health Network, and I'm speaking from the Venice office. First of all, I would like to thank the very many of you who are now connected, and also those who will be connected for the next webinars, which will be in May and June, and then after the summer. I hope that you can hear me. Philip, if you can confirm, just yes, I can see some people nodding, so that's good. And I would also like to thank my colleague from WHO. This is organized by the Venice office together with the Bonn WHO office, which is the European Center for Environment and Health, and also in collaboration with the WHO Regional Office for Europe in Copenhagen. We have quite many speakers today. As I mentioned to you via email, this is a kind of introduction to the series that we will have of these webinars. So we will have a longer presentation on the Ostrava Ministerial Conference and its follow-ups. And then this will be followed by mini slots of 3-4 minutes to each of those technical officers, program managers, who are in charge of presenting the tools in the next webinars. Why are we organizing these webinars? Just a couple of thoughts about that so that we can put things into perspective. The idea came at a workshop that we organized, that Health Cities together with Regions for Health Network organized in Stockholm during the European Public Health Conference last November. The workshop was actually focused on urban health and equity, and during a presentation by WHO, also some of the tools that WHO made available to member states were listed and briefly presented. And immediately there was a reaction from the audience saying that there would be of great use to have more information about the tools and how to use them, and also what are the practical implications for your work. So some of the tools that will be presented during this series are actually rather complex. So I would like to say at the very start that with these webinars we are not aiming at forming any technical professional working in the field on using this tool, because some of them are quite complex, but rather these webinars are meant to inform you about their existence if you don't know about them yet. And of course, we stand ready to support you in case you want to strengthen further the capacity on how to use them practically. But the webinars in the future, the next webinars, will be very practical, also presenting some practical uses of the tools and how they can be useful to your work. This series of webinars falls under the follow-ups of the Ostrava Ministerial Conference on Environment and Health, which took place last June. And of course, it's very well connected to the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. And as you know, there are very many sustainable development goals which are directly or indirectly linked to environment. Before launching this series, we asked our members in RHN and also through Healthy Cities and other networks whether there was a demand for that. And indeed, the demand was very high, and I think that now, for instance, we have more than 30 people connected from several parts of Europe, which is quite remarkable. And actually, we have more than 100 people, representing regions or institutions around Europe, which expressed interest in joining these webinars, and who will join, of course, depending on their interest, the subsequent webinars which we are organizing. I would like to tell you a little bit about the format of this webinar. After this very short introduction, I will give the floor to Srdan MATIC, who is the coordinator of Environment and Health Process, who will give the main presentation of today, which is about Ostrava Ministerial Conference, its follow-up, and what it means to the member states at all their levels of governance, so national, subnational, and local level. And then this, as I mentioned before, will be followed by mini slots assigned to each of my colleagues from the Bonn office. This is a bit of unique format because starting from the next webinar, we will just focus on one tool, so there will be one main presentation on that specific tool, and I will tell you more about the sequence of the webinars. And then there will be practical examples of how the tool has been used, and then a question and answer session. Some housekeeping information about the webinars today. It will last 60 minutes, so we will not take much of your time. In order to minimize the background noise, you have all been muted, and please, if you want to raise any question, and I hope that you will do so, please use the chat. The chat is visible to everyone, just for transparency, I'm telling you that. And also, this webinar is being recorded so that we can send it to those many people who said, yes, we are interested, but we cannot attend today. Again, please vehicle all your questions through the chat, and then I will direct the questions directly to the technical person concerned. With no further delay, I would like to give now the floor to Srdan MATIC, coordinator again of Environment and Health Process. He's speaking from the Copenhagen office, and he has been the big mind behind the Ostrava Ministerial Conference. I would like to thank once again the many speakers that are going to speak today, and also for please keeping the time so that they can have an opportunity to speak. Srdan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesco, and thank you for the introduction. So no need to introduce myself, but let me wish a very good morning and welcome to all our participants to this webinar, which is a very exciting new effort by the Environment and Health team to reach out to our partners and constituents and to present and discuss our joint work in the area of environment and health. As you said, I would like to introduce the 6th Ministerial Conference on Environment and Health, which took place in June 2017 in Ostrava in the Czech Republic, and which is one in a series of ministerial conferences that were organized by WHO since 1989, and which steer the environment and health, European environment and health process, and also create a guidance, strategic guidance for the work of the 53 WHO European member states and their partners in this area. So the European environment and health process is an important intergovernmental and intersectoral process. Its main objective, overarching objective, is to provide a platform for countries and partners to collaborate with each other, and also to create synergies and coherence in our approach to global problems through local action. Next slide, please. The subject that we deal with is the burden of disease that is attributed to environmental determinants in the WHO European region, and it is very significant. At least 1.4 million people die every year due to environmental factors. That is somewhere close to 20% of the total burden of disease in this part of the world. And beyond some obvious things that people usually associate with environmental determinants, such as, let's say, respiratory diseases, it's very important to mention that evidence over the past 10-15 years has shown that the main burden of disease from environmental determinants is related to ischemic heart disease or to the strokes and to the cancers. So 1/4 of all heart diseases and of strokes can be attributed to environmental risks, and 1 in 5 cancers as well. The importance of these numbers is that over the past, let's say, 30 years, despite a huge investment in improving environment around us, both natural and man-made environment done by other sectors, this burden of disease due to environmental factors has remained largely unchanged. And the main theme of and topic of conversation and discussion at the Ostrava Ministerial Conference was, what is it that we need to do in order to significantly make progress on reducing the burden of disease due to environmental factors? Next slide, please. The most important thing to say about health in general is that health in general is a political option, and it's a political matter, and the interventions, public health interventions that countries and authorities at various levels, from local to national and international, are a matter of political choices and decisions that will have tremendous impact on the environmental determinants and their health impact. The importance of this area that we are discussing is significant because environment and the related diseases and deaths carry considerable economic and social costs. They consume significant resources, prevent the attainment of optimal health and well-being, and they also undermine societal and economic development. For example, 2 years ago, we made an attempt to estimate the economic burden of air pollution in terms of health, and we estimate that at least $1.6 trillion every year is the economic value of the burden of disease due to pollution of the air. It is also very important to say that the largest part of environment-related diseases and deaths are preventable, and that we have knowledge, policy instruments, tools, and interventions to do so for many of them. So it is very important to stir political action and to facilitate the work in the policy area in order to improve the situation. Next slide, please. So this was the background for the organization of the 6th Ministerial Conference in Czech Republic last year. It was hosted by the government of the Czech Republic, by the Silesian Moravian region, and by the city of Ostrava. And for the first time, it was it had a participation in very large, important numbers of representatives of subnational levels of governance. And we are very grateful to the regions and the cities that sent their representatives to the conference. We believe that they are an important constituency for WHO, and this is the place where action makes a difference one way or the other. And we understand the importance of including the subnational levels of governance in the international processes. Next slide, please. It was one of the largest ministerial conferences up to now. We had over 800 participants. There were representatives of 46 WHO member states from this region, global, also member states from other regions, and a very large number of partners and stakeholders in the process. Next slide, please. The political outcome of this conference was the ministerial declaration, the Ostrava Declaration, which has two important annexes. One is a compendium of possible actions, and they are organized in 7 priority areas, which are a guiding tool for the member states to develop their portfolios for action. and the Annex on Institutional Arrangements, which regulates the governance architecture of the environment and health process after Ostrava. Next slide, please. So the main political commitments that were undertaken by the member states and partners in Ostrava, they revolve around four main issues. First, the declaration defines the European environment and health process as a mechanism for the attainment of environment-related health goals and targets of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda through the implementation of Health 2020 policy framework in Europe and of all the body of relevant WHO resolutions of the World Health Assembly and of the Regional Committee. Second, it reaffirms the commitments to address the persistent burden of disease related to environment in the European region. It commits, countries commit, to promoting coherence across all policy levels, from international to local, developing inclusive platforms to facilitate dialogue at the international, national, and subnational levels of policy making, and engaging institutional and social actors and stakeholders. And finally, the country is committed to enhance national implementation through the development of national portfolios for action on health and environment by the end of 2018. And these national portfolios should take into account national priorities, means, and capacities in the context of regional and global identified priorities. Next slide, please. So the 7 priority areas that Ostrava conference focused on, and the declaration as well, they acknowledge that there is a diversity in the European region in terms of environment and health challenges, political priorities, means, and capacities that require a flexible and context-specific approach in the definition of national and local priorities. And therefore, there is an understanding that environment and health actions in a very traditional areas such as water, sanitation, and hygiene needs to be pursued on the one hand until the last gaps and inequalities in access to basic facilities are closed. But it also focuses on interventions and areas that have potentially the greatest impact on the achievement of the relevant sustainable development goals and targets. Next slide, please. The importance, really the focus of the Ostrava Declaration is on implementation, on localization, on sustainability of the joint work on environment and health. It embraces the complexity of the issues that we are talking about. It is focused on health impact and not only on environmental impact of interventions, and equity represents a very important target as well. It is about leaving nobody behind, but it's also about the recognition that even with an overall improvement of conditions for everybody, people who are in disadvantaged social and other circumstances would be affected much worse than those who are living in affluent conditions. And the priorities that were identified in Ostrava, they really cover a very wide range of issues, such as exposures or locations, and finally very complex systems such as climate change and waste and their health impact. Next slide, please. I think in conclusion, I would like to reiterate that the environment and health process was identified by the countries as the implementation mechanism for achieving environment-related health goals and targets of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. That it addresses the persistent burden of diseases related to environment, and despite progress in environmental protection, the burden of disease in Europe remained persistent and did not change dramatically over 20 or 30 years. Among the problems that were identified is certainly the issue that problems that we're talking about are usually addressed vertically, and they really don't have a proper home in the governance systems that we have in the countries. So environment and health is something that very often falls between the cracks. And having an international process like this one greatly helps to identify multiple stakeholders and bring them together. So collaboration between and across sectors, which is less than optimal, really requires platforms that can take this further. So with those words, I would like to close my introduction to what the process is about. You will hear in the rest of the webinar today and in the following sessions a lot about the content and about very specific interventions and tools and knowledge that we have about 7 priorities from Ostrava, and that are available to the member states, to the local authorities and the regions to advance the environment and health agenda further. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Srdan. I think the presentation was excellent and also very comprehensive, giving an overview of this very important milestone, which was the Ostrava Ministerial Conference, and really it's driving the agenda in the field. Thank you very much also for highlighting the important, essential, crucial role that the subnational level has to play. That was a very explicit outcome of this ministerial conference, and as you said, for the first time, the subnational level, regions and cities could participate in a large number to this conference. And I would like also to remind us all that there was a statement which was jointly made by Regions for Health Network and Healthy Cities, which I guess you are familiar with. And the statement has actually 5 pillars which are reinforcing the Ostrava Declaration. One is about reduced inequities. The other one is about the importance of local leadership. The other one is about advancement of human rights, the importance of intersectoral action, and the last pillar is about improved resilience. Thank you also for reminding us all about the compendium of actions, which is an important annex to the Ostrava Declaration. And member states at all their levels of governance are now called to commit and choose which actions are they are going to carry out in the future. Please, to all participants, if you have any questions for Srdan, please write them in the chat, and we will take the questions at the end of the presentations. Now, I would like to ask Francesca RACIOPPI, who is another big mind behind the Ostrava Ministerial Conference. Francesca is a Senior Policy and Program Advisor, and she's going to present the Health Economic Assessment Tool for Walking and Cycling. Francesca, many people have already said that they want to participate in your, so to say, webinar. Your tool is one of the most popular, I would say. So please tell us more about that and why people should attend your webinars, which is the next in line planned for the 8th of May, same time as of today, 11 a.m. Thank you. Sorry, Francesca, we cannot hear you.
Yes. So, good morning, everybody.
Okay.
I hope that now you can hear me well. And thanks, Francesco, for the introduction. Actually, your last remarks about how central are going to be regions and cities to the implementation of the Ostrava Declaration and the portfolio for actions is extremely appropriate to the HEAT, the Health Economic Assessment Tool, because this little software, which is freely available through our websites, was created precisely with the idea of serving the needs of cities and regions, as well as member states, when it comes to making explicit and making visible the contribution that active mobility, particularly cycling and walking, can make to improve health. So if I may have the next slide. If you move forward so you can see everything here. The next one, please. Previous one, please. Yes, thank you. The HEAT, the Health Economic Assessment Tool, has been a major effort of collaboration. We have been working with the partners, including member states, the European Commission, researchers all around Europe, and to develop it, we had to bring together expertise from many different sectors. You cannot have a HEAT tool without having the expertise of epidemiology, transport economists, environmentalists, users, and people working on health economics. The next slide, please. Why did we develop it? First of all, we had in mind that the WHO European region consists of 53 member states. It means that we have to be able to address a group of countries where knowledge, capacities, familiarities with issues are widely different. And we need to be able to address, in particular, civil servants, staff who are supporting policymakers, and officers and experts locally, where you may not necessarily have readily accessible information and expertise on the most advanced stages of health impact assessment or economic analysis. The next one, please. So we thought that if we were going to develop a tool, this model should stand out from any other for some specific characteristics, and these are unique of the HEAT. If you go on the marketplace, you will find that there are excellent models to run health impact assessment of cycling and walking, but they tend to be fairly complex. Very often it may need several months to run them because you need complex information and you need to provide it in a certain way. So what we wanted to offer with the HEAT was a tool that would be scientifically robust. So we want the users to trust the information that they get through the tool, to be very user-friendly. So we try to minimize the requirement on data input, and we provide the default values. So if people have their own data, they can use their own data, but if they don't, they can use the default values which are provided by the tool. We are transparent because we explain throughout the process what is the approach, the methodological approach, and which are the assumptions. We want to be conservative because we don't want the results. I mean, the effects of physical activity on health are so important. Just to think that it reduces overall mortality, total mortality by approximately 10%. So we are speaking already of a very big effect. And of course, this translates into big numbers when it comes, for example, to their economic value. So the tool has to be conservative. So whenever we had to make a decision and adjustments, we always take a conservative approach. So you will not have an excess, a result which is in excess of the most conservative defaults. We wanted the tool to be adaptable to the different needs and to be modular so that you can decide what you are going to run according to your needs and the data which are available to you. The next one, please. So it is an online tool. This is the website where you can access it. We didn't have in mind the epidemiologists when we designed it. We had in mind transport planners and urban planners, because we acknowledge that policies to improve cycling and walking will be mostly implemented and steered by people who are working in these departments within local governments. We wanted to be able to provide an economic assessment of the health benefits of cycling and walking, because again, we know that the decisions at the local and national level are often taken on the basis of cost-benefit analysis. So people make decisions on the basis of economic parameters. And if we don't help them to look also at the walking and cycling in those terms, we may risk that the cycling and walking will be deprioritized and marginalized when coming to making decisions on transport options in cities. We need to be evidence-based, of course, and then I've already said, highlighted the transparency and adaptability. The next slide, please. So in short, what do? We try to answer a relatively simple question, but it took several years to find a user-friendly way to answer that. And we try to answer the question, if we have a certain number of people who walk or cycle a given amount on most days, what is the economic value of the health benefits that occurs as a result of the reduction in mortality due to physical activity? For the time being, we are concentrating on mortality because this is, from a feasibility point of view, the most feasible kind of health impacts that we can look at, and also it is the most relevant one when we are speaking also in terms of public health and advocacy. But of course, in the future, we expect to be able to address also aspects related to morbidity. And with the newest development of the HIT that was launched in October last year, we are also able to factor in the effect of air pollution and crashes, as well as how emissions of carbon dioxide are changing because we are having shifts of people moving from motorized transportation to cycling and walking. So we are trying to address an important questions by policymakers that I have heard several times over the year when we say, oh, let's go and promote cycling and walking because it is good for health. The first thing they come back and they tell us is, wait a second, but my city is polluted. Is it safe to tell people to cycle and walk more because they will be exposed to air pollution? So the HIT in its new release helps addressing this question, and I can tell you that the answer is extremely reassuring. We can move to the next one. We have been using the tool worldwide, and the website has been visited more than 40,000 times by more than 26,000 visitors since 2011. The site is in English, so of course there is the users and those who are proficient in the English language are represent a very sizable part of our users. It has had a variety of applications, and it has also been used as an official method, for example, by the English in England by the Department of Transport. It has been part of their official methodology for economic assessments, and also in a number of national but also academic developments. The next one. Next slide, please.
I don't think there are any more slides.
Oh, sorry, because there was the last slide that was the invitation to join us on the 8th of May and to participate in the webinar. We will be assisted by Dr. Nick Cavill. He is one of our trainers for the use of the tool. We will help you we will run you through it and demonstrate it, and will be available to answer your questions. And this is the last slide that I wanted to show to you. Please note the website, play with it while you are waiting and raising your appetite for more on the 8th of May. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Indeed, the appetite, not only for the time, but it's very high, I am sure. And also, it's so important that through this tool, you're actually able to build the argument to make the case for active mobility. So I have no doubt that there will be very many attendees to your next webinars in May. Thank you so much also for your clarity. And now we are moving to Dorota JAROSINSKA. Dorota is Program Manager, Living and Working Environment Program, and she is going to speak about air pollution, which is a major environment-related public health issue. And again, also this tool is very, very interesting and appealing. Dorota, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that you can hear me well. I'm very happy to present a tool, AirQ+, which helps us to quantify the health impacts of air pollution. as we have already heard...
Dorota, if you can speak a bit closer to the microphone so that we can hear you better. Thank you.
Okay. Is it better now? Okay, great. So, as we have heard from the introductory remarks of Srdan, of course, environmental burden of disease is huge, and air pollution has a substantial part in it, and it's the prime environmental risk factors to public health globally and in Europe. The next slide, please. So the tool, which is already available for 2 years now, called AirQ+, allows us quantification of the health impact of air pollution. Through the use of this tool, we can generate the estimate of the health impact of exposure to classical air pollutants. And the tool is designed primarily to support decision makers in quantifying the impacts of air pollution on human health, and through this, to design and implement more targeted actions in order to efficiently protect public health. This tool...
Dorota, sorry, just because I see one comment from the chat. If you can please speak closer to the microphone because your voice is up and down. Thank you.
Okay. So the tool allows quantification of the health impact of exposure to air pollution, both in the context of a short-term as well as long-term exposure. The next slide, please. So, which questions can we answer through the calculations made with the use of AirQ+? We can answer the question of how much of certain health effects, mainly mortality, can be attributed to the exposure to selected air pollutants. And what's very important in the context of taking actions is if we compare to the current situation, what would be the change in the health status, in the health effects, if air pollution levels change in the future, if the air quality improves. Again, as indicated also by Francesca, the tools that we are working on are meant to be very practical, not to be very sophisticated at the user's end. However, they are, of course, designed using the most up-to-date scientific evidence and using the data which allow us to generate as robust estimates as possible. And this tool is designed mainly for public health and environmental practitioners. And the idea is that it's not only targeting experts with very high knowledge in specific domains like atmospheric modeling, statistical methods, etc. So again, the main idea behind is to have a tool that would support policy making to protect public health. The next slide, please. On the WHO website, the tool is available, and we also have a user forum. And in the last year, we ran a small analysis of the users, and I believe that these survey results can be also quite interesting to give an idea of who is using the tool and how the tool is being used. So I mentioned that we were targeting mainly environment and public health practitioners. When we look at the profile of the users, we see that academia so far is the biggest user. The next one, please. Mainly experts representing environment and health sector are using the tool, and what's important that the tool is being used still largely for research purposes, but also for health impact assessment and local consultancy. Next one, please. It is also interesting to note that the tool is being used at different levels, national, regional, but also very extensively at the local level. So again, getting back to the introductory remarks and the need of actions at different scales. And colleagues are mainly interested in working with these classical air pollutants, mainly with particulate matter. The next one, please. Next. So you will hear more details about the technical aspects of using the tool during the June webinar, and we hope to have many participants. And we also hope that the connection will be better, because I hear that there are colleagues who cannot hear very well. Apologies for that. So we do hope that the dedicated webinar, which will be given by my colleague Pier Paolo Mudu, will attract many of you, and you will hear more details about how to do analysis, what kind of the data can be used, because there is also quite a big flexibility in the data input to the tool. But we are also working on further improvements and expansions of the tool. We are now about to release the other language versions of the tool, the Russian and the French language versions, and also are working on new functionalities, meaning to allow estimates of the burden of disease due to air pollution in line with the overall WHO methodology. So thanks a lot for now, and hope to meet many of you in June. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorota. No doubt there will be very many participants to your webinars, which is planned for the 5th of June. And as you mentioned, we could actually hear you speaking over the presentation. It's important to mention that also this software is available, will be available in Russian, which makes it attractive also for the eastern part of WHO Europe. Thank you very much, Dorota, once again. And now we are moving to another important topic, climate change. And about that, Vladimir KENDROVSKI, Technical Officer, Climate Change and Health, is going to speak about assessing the health damage and adaptation costs of climate change. This webinar will be later after the summer break, but still this is to raise a little bit the appetite on this. Thank you very much. Vladimir.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you for your kind invitation to present this tool. Of course, climate change affects health, and health effects have economic consequences. Thus, WHO Regional Office for Europe prepared this tool on economic analysis to support health adaptation planning in European member states. Next slide, please. We are aware that priorities are many and we have very limited budgets. So when we talk about the adaptation in climate change, definitely the adaptation planners needs to know the cost of inaction or doing nothing in terms of the economic consequences of the health impacts of climate change, but also to see the cost of action if we implement the adaptation through the measures in the health sector, but also these taken in other sector which focus to protect health. Next slide, please. And then this is very important because assessing the health economics is very important because the climate change adaptation should follow the same principle as other public policies like accountability or transparency, and it should be based on the evidence. And my assessing the health economics, because this economic dimension of the problem often is not well recognized, or doing nothing entails large economic costs that should be revealed to enable rational decision, and definitely the health adaptation often makes good business sense. Next slide, please. So that's why this WHO toolkit tool consists of a manual, which is describing the methods step by step, together with the Excel spreadsheet, which is a visual aid for calculating the cost, and both are available in our WHO Euro website on climate change. The planned webinar on this tool will provide step-by-step guidance on estimating through the chosen example the cost associated with damage to health due to climate change. Then we will try to explain the cost for adaptation in various sectors to protect health from climate change, and to the end, the efficiency of adaptation measure, the calculation, one kind of cost-benefit analysis, and we will have the cost of adaptation versus the expected returns, as we call the averted health cost. So I will invite you, you interested in this, to attend this webinar, and I promise you that you will have some interesting skills. You can develop these skills together with your colleagues and to provide the result to your stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. I also hear that from users that this is very practical tool, and I guess that so far we have heard of things that we can relate very much in our life, air pollution, walking and cycling, now climate change. These are all topics of paramount importance. And another term that we keep hearing is health impact assessment. And so what are the tools on that? Marco Martuzzi, Program Manager, Environment and Health Impact Assessment Program, is going to tell us something more about these tools. Marco, the floor is yours, and I guess that we can also see you on the video. Now we see Vladimir, but that will switch to Marco, I assume. Thank you very much, Marco.
Thank you, Francesco, and everybody for taking part in this webinar. It's a pleasure, and for me also relatively new format, so very exciting way of promoting our work. When it comes to health impact assessment, which is the topic of our program here in the Bonn office, well, it's really, I mean, the tools that you've heard about so far are part of that. They are tools for looking at different aspects of health impact assessment, including about some topics, including economic costs, but the HIA is really at the core of that. Next slide, please. In the general, generally speaking, HIA can be maybe visualized better if you think of an example. As Srdan said, waste is one of the priority topics, and one example of HIA could be, you know, that in a situation where a new incinerator is proposed, the question is, what are the expected health impacts? How are they distributed locally or globally? And one would like to have an inclusive, perspective, considering all consequences and a broad health model. You consider not only negative adverse impacts, but also positive aspects, include mortality, morbidity, exposures, and also soft endpoints having to do with perceived health or well-being and quality of life and so on. That's the ideal. Of course, it's a very challenging kind of exercise, but there are quite some ways to and a tradition on how to proceed with that. One thing that is very important for everybody to keep in mind is that environmental impact assessment is in most countries mandatory. And there is also quite some knowledge available on how to consider health in an environmental impact assessment, and we have some publications that help in that respect. And another one is, of course, because this is very policy relevant kind of work, how to deal with communication. I want to mention communication. Next slide, please. Also to refer to some previous work we did within the RHN and also with the Trento province and other colleagues that are more or less related to the network previously on environment and health, communicating the risk. This is, in a sense, also a rather practical resource for looking at communication aspects in environment and health. Next, please. I'd like to mention three things, three tools, one way or another. One is under preparation. It's something that we've been working on for a year or so, and I think will be become available in the coming few months. It's a wiki, a web site for HIA, for the theory and practice of health impact assessment and consideration of health in other impact assessments, notably environmental impact assessment or strategic environmental assessment. So the things that are done routinely by environmental authorities most often and can be conveniently piggybacked by the health community. So this wiki and website will be an entry point to practical implementation of HIA. It will build on our experience with many member states and many expert networks on HIA. It will carry data, case studies, training materials. We do quite a bit of capacity building, and we aim at making this wiki a repository of all these resources. So this will come later this year, and will through the RHN will keep everybody informed. Next, I have two rather, I would say, sophisticated tools to mention. Next slide, please. And these are two freeware software packages that we use in workshops in member states, which are designed for the quantitative part in HIA, the appraisal, the estimating, the measurable impacts. One is R, which is a big package for statistical analysis, as I say, freely available online. And it's very large and complete, but there's a lot of contributed libraries and applications in the public health domain, in epidemiology and health impact assessment. And the community of risk assessors and epidemiologists and HIA is increasingly using R for the statistical analysis. It's not something that can be easily introduced in a webinar. We'll think about that, but typically we do workshops that require a couple of days of hands-on to get into it. And really, once you've done that investment, it's a very, very powerful resource. Similarly, next slide is something we've been promoting for a while for geographic data. Geographic data, when you present maps and visualize things through geography, are extremely powerful, not only communication, but also analytical and in a sense, policy, for policy discussion. They have to do with distribution of effects and impacts, so that's a very important issue and very dear, apparently, to the interests of regions, understandably. So with something which is called QGIS, another large and freely available software, we work with experts and advisors how to use them, and getting started is again requires some investment, but it's also quite rewarding in the short term. You can essentially integrate data in a common geographic format, So you can mix information from exposure assessment on risk and scenario, all in a very graphically appealing way. In these workshops, we link these different sources of information and generate quite nice outputs, and maps, like the last slide that I want to show you, which is an example of some work. Next slide, please. An example of some work done in England, in northwest England. It actually combines the two tools that I showed, R and QGIS. This is a map of brain cancer for wards, small areas in northwest England, where you have on the left the crude rates, the kind of risks that are visible if you just count the number of cases. But those are very small numbers, so there's a lot of variability, and through some smoothing techniques that are routinely done in R, and then represented through QGIS is a nice map. You can highlight here on the right. You show the kind of more realistic distribution of brain cancer risk in this particular region. Now, there's a lot behind this kind of exercise. However, we've seen it repeatedly in many cases that this kind of output can be extremely useful in driving not only the scientific debate and finding causes and explanations for that, but also in driving the policy debate. Typically, when you have potential sources of risks, we do a lot of work on for example, industrially contaminated sites, and these are the kind of issues that motivate a lot the discussion, the local discussion and debate, and in the end, decision around environmental hazards. So as I say, this is we need to discuss a bit more in detail, I suppose, Francesco, how much of this lends itself to webinars or not. But in any case, we wanted to raise to draw your attention to the fact that these are additional tools, in this case rather more demanding in a way, for health impact assessment of environmental factors well, at all levels, but I guess they work very nicely at the regional level. And with that, over.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marco. That was extremely interesting as well. Just one important correction. In the slide, it is written that the environment, the publication on communicating environment hazards is done with Veneto region. Instead, it was done, as you rightly said, with the autonomous province of Trento. So that's something to be said that was also mentioned in the chat. And last but not least, we are moving to the last speaker, Matthias BRAUBACH, Technical Officer for Housing and Urban Health and Environmental Equity. Matthias, we hear a lot about urban green space and blue spaces. How can we actually promote better their use? Can you tell us something more about that? Thank you.
Thanks, Francesco. And good morning from my side. How can we use the benefits of urban green spaces? I think this is one of the main questions that has been worked on over the last years, not only in WHO, but also very much in our office in Bonn on the health impacts of urban green spaces. And I think it is very important to note that talking about urban green space in general, access to nature in urban settings is going way beyond the health dimension alone. We talk about well-being, quality of life, a lot of opportunities for active and healthy lifestyle, social and environmental and health dimensions come together here. And it's one of the topics that you find under many different headings these days. It can relate very much to ecosystem services, It is a part of the nature-based solutions agenda. So it is one of the areas, especially in the area of urban planning and health, that is streamlined, but at the same time you can link it to many processes and buzzwords around. What we have worked on over the last years is on the health impacts of urban green spaces. What are the positive as well as the negative impacts on health and well-being? And we have started off with a review of the evidence on health, and then we moved on to a review of the interventions and the practical actions that can be done on local level to embed urban green spaces in their cities, in their settings. What are the best ways and what are the impacts of having more urban green, more urban nature? And this we have then pulled together into a brief for action. So it's important to note that this is not a tool, it's more a guide on giving information what can be done on urban green spaces, how can they be embedded, what is important to note when doing this. And this document, the Brief for Action, has been published last year at the International Conference on Biodiversity and Health, and we have received numerous requests for translation. So we are very soon going to have the German version online, and Russian, Finnish, Portuguese and French already exist. So there's a few other translations coming up. So there's a lot of different languages available to, and then please next slide, to look into the information that has been put together by the project, giving practical guidance on how to make sure that you do have adequate and healthy sustainable green spaces in your urban settings. So we will start in this guide putting very shortly the relevance of urban green spaces and the impact it has. And then we will go into guidance for local actors to discuss how green spaces should be embedded in the planning process, how they should be designed, how you can get the public to engage in that process, how can you promote the use of urban green space to monitor the impacts, and then what is very important to us because it's often forgotten, there are risks attached with nature in urban settings as well, and how to prevent and manage these challenges and conflicts is something that is also discussed and presented in this guide. What we do have ongoing at the moment is, next slide please, a further step that has been initiated by this work in the European Office on Green Spaces and Health and now is going on in collaboration with headquarters. There's a tool under development called the Green Space Plus that also looks into more tool type approach to put all the evidence together. It is operating on a GIS base on a free software. It is currently in process and being piloted in different cities. The idea here is to offer to local authorities an easy approach to, first of all, quantify the access to green spaces that they do have in their city and the distribution of green space in their city to identify where is more and where is not enough. And then also to link this with existing data on the health impact. So you could immediately, by using the tool, get some information on what is the health impact of your green space situation, and then possibly extrapolate if you make certain changes to the green infrastructure, what health impacts would that have. This is a tool that is under development, and we hope that by the end of this year and in the second half of this year, when the webinar on green spaces will take place, we will have a functional version on that, so it could be part of this webinar as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Extremely interesting, and indeed, we hope that this tool will be finalized and maybe actually can be tested in one of the, when your webinar will take place later on this year. Thank you also for highlighting the local dimension and the importance of the municipal and the local level in dealing with this specific topic and the intersectorality function that is needed for that. I understand that there are no questions. Only one was about sharing the presentations from Srdan, and also all the other presentations will be shared with all of you, those who participate in these webinars and also those who are in the emailing list for the future webinar. I mean, I'm not surprised that we don't have many questions because this is more like an introductory webinar, but I'm sure that you are keeping your questions for future webinars. We have a question for Matthias. Dear Matthias, what steps should we follow if we would like to provide an Italian translator of your guide? I guess that maybe you might want to say something about the Italian translation.
Yeah, thank you. There is already translation ongoing in 2 additional languages that is not yet finalized. One is Italian, and I would need to check what the status is. They have received all the documents for translation. I can follow up. So that is already ongoing. And there is, in general, for WHO procedures regarding the translation of WHO documents, there's a formal request to be done. And then it's just some bureaucratic act, but we support all translations of the documents to make it available in many different languages. I think I will come back specifically on that question after checking what is the status of the Italian translation, then I'll get back to Peru directly after that event.
Okay, thank you very much. That's just another proof that there is a great demand also for this action or checklist guide on green spaces. I think it was an extremely interesting webinar with a presentation of, now we have, I don't know how many, but yeah, very many participants from all over Europe. So I would like to thank all our speakers and of course all the participants. I would just like to remind you about our subsequent webinars. The first one in line will be on the 8th of May, and it will be about HEAT, so the tool for walking and cycling. No doubt we will have many participants. Please book the time at 11 a.m. And the one on AirQ Plus and air pollution will be on the 5th of June. I'm sure that also for this one there will be many participants. Then later on we will announce the dates of the next webinars, which will be after the summer. There will be 3 more webinars. So I'm very glad that today we marked this beginning of using also this IT platform, which I think it's very powerful of WebEx for connecting people and for sharing information. Once again, thank to all of you and my colleagues, and also a special thank to Philip, our IT person in Bonn, who managed to deal with this first test webinar. So I wish you all a very good and healthy day with a lot of active mobility today at least. And I will see you all and many more on the 8th of May. Thank you very much. Bye-bye from Venice. Ciao.